For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kelly Martin, and as Gavin calls me so lovingly, Heather's mom. I want to thank you, all of you, for being here today, this afternoon. It is nice to be here on a 95-degree day in a nice air-conditioned church, so that's a plus. Hopefully we're not taking you away from too much. We had the opportunity to meet with Epiphany's congregation today at 9:15, and our goal today is to talk about the possibility of the New Hope and Epiphany merger. And so we've been doing an assessment on that, and I'm a part of the project management team along with Dennis Monty and Shelley Evans. And so all three of us will be talking today. We do not have a lot of the committee reports because they are extra lengthy for most of them, and they have a lot of detail in them. What we're going to do today is we have Pastor Vogt with us, and he is the mission counselor, and he'll tell you a little bit about what he does and talk to us about mergers. In addition to that, Ben, if you want to go to the next slide, I just want to let you know we have this will not take all afternoon, I promise. In 50 minutes at Epiphany. So Pastor will speak. We'll have some, Scott will join us. We have Scott Martin from Building and Grounds. Very close with John Pamper. Marzigliano is also a gentleman on that committee. We'll have Dennis talk a little. Pastor Zarling will be here, and he'll talk about the nice lunches that he and Pastor Goggins have and some of their discussions about the merger. We're going to have a little bit of, depending on where we are in time, I'll do a whirlwind summary of the committee statuses and what our next steps are. The next steps will require a little bit of reading homework on your behalf. So there will be time for question and answers for Pastor Vogt since he's here speaking with us. Otherwise, we're prepping you for our August meeting. All right, and Pastor Vogt.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience and allowing me to get here. They threw a third service on over there at Epiphany, and I found out about it last night around 8. So you're getting your money's worth out of me today. So first of all, my name is Matt. I'm in Las Vegas. For the last 2.5 years, I've been serving in this role as mission counselor. I'm the mission counselor for half of our country and Canada, all right, for 7 of the 12 districts of our synod. But if you look at a map, you realize that southeast Wisconsin is not very west. So you are my easternmost territory. So I largely have served my entire ministry in a mission setting. And while this isn't technically a mission entity or a mission project, prayerfully, we all recognize that our role, each one of us, every church, is to be a mission entity. And so the only reason that any of this makes sense moving forward is that we adopt a really healthy mission mindedness about why we're doing what we're doing. I've been asked to start with a brief devotion, and I'll just share with you then, as I mentioned, started a brand new church in Las Vegas 20-some years ago, and it was sent out there out of the seminary, and was at the time my 11-year-old brother's idea to name our church Water of Life. He said, "You're going out to the desert to start a church, you should call it Water of Life." I said, "Well, that sounds like a really neat idea, but let's see what the Bible has to say about it." And sure enough, the Bible has a lot to say about it. That image of water, the water of life, the living water, is used throughout the scriptures to get right to the heart of the gospel. That what water is to the body, so also the gospel is to the soul. It is essential to life, first of all, right? That without it, we do not have life. Without the gospel, we do not have our life with God, our spiritual life, our eternal life. It is also refreshing. So I know it's 90 some degrees today. That's 20 degrees cooler to me than where I come from. If you've been spending a weekend in 112, 115 degree heat, the water is very refreshing, right? You just want to stop the car and jump in it. So also is the message of full and free forgiveness of sins and peace with God and a relationship with the God of love and a life eternal with him in heaven, the hope that provides. It's just a very, very refreshing, desperately sought after in our world of dryness and death and darkness today. And so this was a very, very fitting name for our church, which wanted to, again, communicate the gospel to a bunch of people lost in the dryness and the deadness of sin in the desert. Just an illustration related to that. So I had a little patch of grass. I'm from the Midwest, and I still wanted to retain my little patch of the Midwest. I believe we're the only house on the street that still has grass in our lawn. Everybody else has gone to xeriscape, but still want my grass, and it is a little patch. I think it takes longer for me to start my lawn mower than it takes to mow my lawn. But there's these little circles of brown in my yard, and you want to know where they are in relation to the sprinkler heads in my yard. Here's a sprinkler head, and here's a 6-inch circle of dead grass. Do you know how frustrating that is? How can you be that close to the water and not get it, right? Now, I've since learned it's not rocket science, and I figured it out, but technically, this sprinkler doesn't spray this part. This sprays over here, and then this one over here sprays this, and this one over here sprays this. But the frustration of being that close to the water and not getting it. Right? And it happens in spiritual circles too, right? You can have a church that is surrounded by souls dead in transgressions and sins because the people in that church never thought to go out and share the gospel with their neighbors, right? And or we can be surrounded by unchurched and unbelieving acquaintances, and we can talk all day long about our kids, about the weather, about the Packers, but we never get around to talking about Jesus, right? And thankfully this does not happen in our circles, but a person can come into a quote-unquote Christian church, be completely dialed into what it is that the preacher is saying, hanging on his every word, but because he's not preaching law, gospel, sin and grace, repentance and forgiveness, that soul is not being watered. Right? One of my favorite passages in the Bible, Hebrews 12:15, says, "See to it that no one misses the grace of God." See to it that no one misses the grace of God. That is an awesome charge that God has given to us. Right? I don't know in my wisdom that I would have done that. In my wisdom, I would have sent the angels out. In my wisdom, I would have given the rocks the ability to talk. But in God's wisdom, God has given us the privilege, the responsibility to be his witnesses, to be his mouthpiece, to be his ambassadors, to see to it that no one misses the grace of God. Right? And again, there are many things that get in our own personal lives that become a distraction. There are many things that get in the way of our congregational lives. All of us by nature, and when you throw a whole bunch of us together, a congregation is by nature selfishly thinking about ourselves and what do we need and what do I want. And the Lord would have us think kingdom-minded. He would have us think of others. He has said, go and make disciples. See to it that no one misses out on God's grace. As Lutherans, we treasure objective justification, that Jesus is for absolutely everybody. And that's what grace is. Unconditional, undeserved. It's for one, it's for all. Right? And God says now, but our privilege, our responsibility is to see to it that nobody misses out on that Jesus has won and secured for them. So I, first of all, thank you for the efforts that you personally and congregationally have made in seeing to do everything you can in your own life and in your community to help make that happen. I also applaud you for the efforts that you are now, as potentially in combination with Epiphany, considering doing. Right? It's very easy to just say, this is our history, this is where we're at, and this is who we are and what we're going to be. It takes some real energy, some spirit-inspired energy to go ahead and say, all right, our past is our past, and we thank God for the blessings of it. But we need, like the Apostle Paul, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, to press on toward the goal for which Christ has called us heavenward. How can we set ourselves up as a congregation so that we are best equipped and suited to carry out the work that God has placed around us today, and setting ourselves up for, in human terms, success for the future. What does that look like, right? How does that look? And one of the models that has been used throughout our synod is this idea of, whether we call it multi-site or the merging or what have you, whatever label you want to give it, the idea of taking the best that we have to offer in a variety or in various locations, and to come together and pool our resources so that we can maximize the gifts that God has given placed at our disposal. I'll share just a couple examples with you, right? I'm not all that familiar, as I mentioned before, with that which has happened in the Midwest. A lot of it has happened. I'll share with you two examples that I've been involved with out west. One is called Crown of Life in Southern California. Crown of Life started as a mission 20-some years ago, just about the same time our church started, and that mission just kind of grew as a healthy congregation, right? About 7, 8, 9 years ago now, they decided that they're going to start a second location. And that location, again, under the same name and the same leadership, but with a second pastor, was going to be in Riverside, on the west side of Riverside. And they started meeting and met for a number of years, 2, 3, 4, in a movie theater. Then we had already had a Wells Church on the east side of Riverside, California, that had kind of gotten down to the point where there were about 25 members or so on a Sunday in worship. And they reached out to Crown of Life and said, hey, why don't you just move your ministry over to our church, and we'll now, we'll do everything that we do here under Crown of Life. Right? So that second site then became, that's how it kind of really got planted in Riverside. Well, somewhere along the way, a church in Yucaipa, which was now worshiping 9 on Sunday, reached out to Crown of Life and asked them to do that very same thing for them, right? And now there's a fourth location in, I drive through it all the time, Barstow, California, right? That is also appealing. So it's a congregation with 4 sites, 3 pastors, all doing ministry. Every location does not do the exact same thing, because each setting, each community is different, and therefore that ministry needs to be specific to the community. But it's leadership, it's finances, and the DNA of that congregation, how we do what we do, why we do what we do, is shared across those campuses. Another example would be Grace in Tucson or Southern Arizona. So Grace Tucson is a big historic downtown church right on University Avenue, right across the street from the campus of the University of Arizona. And there are they're 100 and now probably 108-year-old congregation. On their 100th anniversary, they decided, as a gift to the Lord of the church, to start a new mission effort, a second campus, a second site. So they started that in Vail, Arizona. Right? And then, not long after that, probably about 4 years ago, a church that had been there for decades. I really don't know how old it was, but they were meeting about 50 to 60 people in a renovated house, and they'd been just worshiping out of that house for years and years. Right? And they appealed to Grace to take what they were doing and come and do that there, and help let them be a part of Grace's ministry. So today, like this summer, as we speak, that group of 50, 60 people are moving into, literally in the next week or 2 or 3, moving into a 16,000 square foot facility, a massive, beautiful, brand new church, a 10,000 square foot school that's going to be early childhood ministry center. They've got 8 called workers. They got 18 other people that have been hired to work in the preschool. They're doing that just over, and that's not something that mission church would have ever been able to do on its own. But by being a part of this multi-site ministry and having all the blessings and the backings of the history and the leadership and the resources that existed, they've been able to step into a setting where they're providing an early childhood ministry for this community that doesn't have one at all. Everybody there has to travel half an hour north up into Tucson to find that. And the city planners have told them, you build this thing and we'll have 100 kids in that school the day you open. Right? But not something that little mission church would have ever been able to accomplish on their own, right? So just an example, and there's a fourth location in that one too. Just an example of the fact that by using the gifts that God has given us, And using the strengths that each of our locations have, we can build off those strengths, and we can allow that individual or those set of gifts to be a blessing, not just for that specific church, but for that church in 2 or 3, or even some cases 4 different locations, right? The blessing of that kind of a model, right? What that looks like here, and when it is that you go about accomplishing it, right? That is something that, and I'm really glad to hear that you guys have set up, takes just regular and effective communication, right? It just takes time to talk to one another. Every situation, like I said, is different. Every merger situation is different. But by discussing and talking and making sure that we do share our spiritual DNA, that we do share our values and the plans that we have moving forward, that it becomes a win-win for both sides, right? And I really, really think that is, for us as a church body, something that makes a whole lot more sense than trying to set up, some larger congregation that people are going to come in from 30, 40 minutes away to all go to that one central location. That serves our Wells people perhaps just fine, but it does not reach our communities, right? And the more spread out we are, the more gospel outposts that we have, the better in being able to reach the people in our community, right? But when you do that, then you start to thin the pool as far as your resources are concerned. And by having congregations working intimately, closely together, again, very often under one name and under one leadership and under one budget and one set of plans, it allows us to be able to combine our resources and not water down or weaken what we're doing, but still being able to do it in a variety of locations. So, all right. Those are just some thoughts that I had, some encouragements that I want to offer, and I will be happy to serve in whatever capacity I can as an outside objective party to some of your discussions. But I applaud the work that you guys are doing, and it's important grunt work that you do. It's an important investment in your congregation and in the Lord's kingdom that you're gonna truly benefit from, as will prayerfully many of those in your community that are not yet being touched by your ministry. As was mentioned before, there really is not a time built into here for Q&A, other than in the few minutes that I had. So if I cannot speak to the specifics of what it is that you guys are doing, because a lot of that is actually still in the process of being figured out. But if anybody has any just general questions about the concept of one congregation in a variety of sites and multiple locations or anything along those lines, be happy to answer those now, or I'll be around afterwards and happy to talk with anybody about some of the things you feel you need. So if there are none, we'll keep this train. All right.
So my request, my job was just a little bit about how we kind of got here, but also Pastor Zarling's going to expand on that and tell his version, which lines up with my version. But then also just to talk about, since we've got mergers going down in Kenosha that have been in progress for quite some time, talk a little bit about some of the benefits that I've seen start to play out, even though those congregations haven't merged yet. So let me just start with one verse. I think this verse also comes up later in the presentation, but it's a good one to keep on our minds. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them. Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. That's the goal in this, is for it to be mutually beneficial. Not just beneficial for one congregation or another, but mutually beneficial, for us to be stronger together than we are separate. How did we get here? It happened, I'm pretty sure it happened at Old Madrid. Pastor Zarling's pretty sure it happened somewhere else. So he'll tell his version of events a little bit later. But at any rate, we were sitting in a restaurant somewhere, and it came up. I said, New Hope needs more pastoral time than I'm able to give them. And Pastor Zarling said, Epiphany needs more pastoral time. They've seen some growth. They've outgrown one pastor. They could use a little more pastoral time to do the things that are slipping through the cracks at Epiphany. Same for here, right? We've since said at New Hope, we need more pastoral time. And so originally we said, well, what if we call a pastor between New Hope and Epiphany, and that pastor is kind of split between the congregations. But that lends itself to some problems as well. It lends itself to some of the resources falling through the cracks. So eventually it came into the discussion of, well, what about a full-on merger? So that between these two campuses, there could be two full-time pastors. Things could be structured in such a way that is beneficial for both congregations, saves time on a number of issues. Part of it comes into the concept of math, right? Pastor Zarling and I and a couple other people have read this book on kind of the gold standard. How do you go about merging, wanting to make that church merger successful, right? Not just a move to survive a little longer, but a move to thrive. And it gets into math, right? So here's some math you are familiar with, because I've been your pastor for a couple of years now. You are familiar with the math 1 + 1 + 1 = a third. So you have a ministry here, and you have a ministry in Kenosha and another ministry in Kenosha, between which you are splitting one pastor. And it doesn't result in 3 ministries, it results in a third, right? The percentages don't, the way we have it structured, but that's ultimately what it kind of results in, a third, a third, a third, right? The goal in this is to do 1 + 1 = 3, right? How would that look? I'll just give you one example. You'll get reports where you get to read more, but I'll just give you one example of how a wiser use of resources, to have 2 pastors between 2 locations here and Epiphany, can be beneficial. This is a huge one. You don't have your pastor having to write a sermon every week, right? So think about the man hours that frees up. The worship committee, not to get into their business too much, but they've been wrestling with that question. How do we save time so that not every week has hours eaten up by a sermon, and rather attention can be diverted elsewhere to things that need to be done? All right, past that, I'll get to the task that I was supposed to do. You heard Pastor Vogt, Mission Counselor Vogt, talk about strengths, right? I think that's a huge one. When you get people together, you have the opportunity to play to each other's strengths. Down in Kenosha, I'm seeing it, right? We have a bigger project going on down there. Here we're 2 churches trying to come together. Down there it's 4 churches, 5 campuses that are trying to come together, right? So there's a lot of puzzle pieces that we're trying to get in place. And even though it's more complicated and it's taken more time, and even though the churches haven't merged yet, it's been neat to see. You can inventory the strengths of the leaders in the area. You can say, what are you good at, right? So that rather than operating as generalists, we can start to operate a little more as specialists, right? So you've got person A that's really good at this list of things, and they're not so good at this list of things. And you say, well, with our resources together, you can focus primarily on those things that you're good at. And this person over here, they'll do some of those things that you're good at, and they happen to be, that they're good at, and they happen to be some of the things that you're not so good at, right? So a wiser use of resources, the better ability to play to our strengths and our talents. In addition, I just wanted to give you a couple today. Another one I have seen play out, and I've started to see it here, is when you get people together to have these talks, what it allows you to do is to dream again, right? To dream for the kingdom of God. You get leaders together and you get to say, what could we do? How could we make things work differently so that we can be more effective, not just in reaching and ministering to our own, but reaching and ministering to our communities. So it's always a good thing to have your leaders and your members excited about something like that again. It's a wonderful opportunity. and we're doing it in our committees. It's a wonderful opportunity to reassess and say, how can we shift things to make them better? That's all I got. I'll leave it there. We're not doing questions, right? All right.
You got to be here in front of this. Good afternoon. I am Scott Martin. I am from Epiphany Lutheran Church. I'm here. Part of this whole project management stuff is building and grounds ministry. I serve on that council committee with Dennis Marzigliano from our church and your very own John Pamprin here. John spoke at our church this morning. I'm here speaking at your church. We're trying to get our churches more blended, get to know each other. So that's why we're kind of switching churches. We were tasked with 6 areas of focus on the ministry or the building and grounds. They're up on the screen. We're tasked to identify the age and maintenance of all of our facilities. John came up, or somebody came up with this great spreadsheet that you have here at this campus. And I'm supposed to add to it, which I haven't done yet. But this way, everyone will know what we're getting into as of the building, the structure of the buildings, the age, what needs to be done, when things were installed, and those sort of things. Our second task was to define the standards for keeping our facilities well kept. We're going to get together and figure out all the major repairs that need to be done, because that's going to be the high money items, which will come into effect later on during the merger. There's going to be problems there with my building, our building. So we want to try to get ahead of that and get a lot of these things done before the merger. Together, we're going to strive. We'll get a budget together, both campuses, and we'll try to maintain that budget. When it comes to doing major renovations, we'll probably have some sort of fundraiser and stuff like that. It'll come into play which campus gets what done first. It'll be a priority thing, which will be based on all people's input. Our third task was create a maintenance plan, and a maintenance plan for things such as changing the filters on a furnace and such what, changing light bulbs and stuff. As a committee, we came together and said, you know, I think the best thing to do would be when we merge is have John. John will be in charge of changing the filters on the furnace at both campuses. Dennis Marzigliano will be in charge of changing light bulbs at both campuses. This way, it helps us spread out ownership of the buildings instead of, once we merge, saying my building, the other building. It's gonna be our building, our buildings. Then we were also tasked with identifying the staff at each campus. Here up in New Hope, you really don't have any staff. At Epiphany, we have an office manager. After the merger, we are planning on expanding, our office manager's here, Rod Strutz, by the way, expanding some of his duties to take over some of the volunteer stuff that's being done. He does stuff like handle the mail, bulletins. I know here it's done by a bunch of volunteers. We like to have an office manager as a paid position because it's for the purpose of accountability. If the pastor doesn't get his paperwork in on time, it doesn't go into the bulletin. So there is an accountability. There's no conflict of, you know, well, we didn't get this done because it's just a structure that we have and it seems to work well for us. We're also tasked with creating a schedule of work days for our campuses. The ECC, which is the early childhood campus at Epiphany's building, our parish house, cutting the grass, stuff like that. We have not been able to get together and do that yet. That is something that's in the plan. And our last thing is work with the IPSC, which is the Inter-Parish School Council, and the WLS administration for maintaining the ECC. Once again, the ECC is the school part on our campus, and our building and grounds is in charge of doing repairs and such. A lot of that money is written off by our school support, and you'll learn all about that next month when we get to the budget part of it. That's really all I have for the part of the building and grounds. But also, since I have another 3 or 4 minutes, I'm just going to take about 3 or 4 minutes and tell you the thoughts that we have at Epiphany in a leadership standpoint. I've been on the council forever at Epiphany. off and on, off and on. I served in many different roles. I kind of have a pulse of what's going on. That's a term that Pastor dubbed me, the pulse of what's going on in a congregation. So I consider myself the church guy. Every church has one. When you come in, it's a guy standing in the back handing out bulletins. Welcome to you, shows you where the bathroom is. That's kind of my role at Epiphany. So through the leadership and all the talking with this merger, through the years, Pastor Zarling is not one to do nothing. He always has to have a project. He has to be going. Years and years ago, he tried to get New Hope, First Evan, and Epiphany to do things together. And there was some resistance from First Evan. And I believe Pastor Yankee at that time says, no, we don't want to do that. We're up here on the north side for a reason. So nothing happened. A little later on, we wanted to do, what is it called? The new, like Foxconn comes in. So, oh, here we go. We're all pumped up. We're going to go out west. We're going to build a new campus. We're going to invite all these people in and give them the word of God. Didn't happen. Pastor Scoggins comes in. Now, all the next thing you know, they start working together. I don't think things happen by chance. They started talking about this merger. Pastor Zarling brought it to the council. We said, wow, sounds like a good idea. We can probably do that. This is the first time in over 20 years that I've been in the church council that we have progressed this far in a situation. I do think that is God's timing. I think the timing is right for all this to happen. And the reason is you're going to hear some numbers like Epiphany has 400 members. I think we have 200 that attend church on a regular basis. Here at New Hope, you have 120. 100 member, 60 come to church? Okay, so there's about, between the two churches, there's probably 240 people that aren't hearing the word of God on a regular basis. Part of this merger, and you talk about the time, I believe that's our inner ministry, is to reach out to so many souls. At Epiphany, we do a really good job of getting new members in, mainly through God puts them in our door, or they happen to just come from the school. We don't do a very good job maintaining them. I think a lot of the problems you'll hear is that Epiphany, we're 90 years old. Some of our ideas are 90 years old. You guys have only been here for like 40 years. I'm hoping that you'll bring brighter ideas to some of the things that we don't do properly. You'll see, I have to give as we're moving forward in this so quickly, I have to actually give a big hands up to our project management team. When we met as both councils at our church and talked about this, one of the first things we said afterwards is, let's get a project management team to keep this going forward. As with any church, you get a bunch of us old church guys sitting around and we talk, and we talk, and we talk, and nothing gets done. Shelley and Kelly here are really got to keep us on task. This is almost like a business, so we have to be accountable for every step of the way to keep this moving forward so it doesn't. And I think time's up. Oh, okay. And one of the big things, just to keep in mind that as we move forward in this, you're going to hear a lot more. Hopefully, we'll stop saying Epiphany and New Hope. We'll use North Campus, South Campus, but this is being done for God's kingdom. You got to keep that in mind, that we're doing this to expand the gospel to those 240 people that I talked about, and also those that are still out there that haven't heard about God. So just keep that in mind. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, well, everybody here knows who I am. You may not know that I'm also a member of the project management team. So my talk at Epiphany was basically to let them know who New Hope is. You know, we know New Hope, we know Epiphany, we know First Evan, but a lot of people really don't know a lot of the details about those congregations. You know, First Evan has been there forever. Epiphany's been there for 90 years. New Hope is the youngest congregation in this area. And I want to tell you a little bit about New Hope because a lot of you weren't here from the beginning. We've only got a small handful of people that are members of our congregation that were here at the inception of New Hope. So let me give you a little biography of New Hope, and then I can get into some other things. Around 1980, a group of families who knew each other from different Lutheran bodies decided that this was a very fertile field out here. Literally, because this was a farm, but you know, a fertile field. And they wanted to see a WELS congregation in this area, and they also hoped that someday there would be a school here. So the charter was signed, and New Hope became a congregation. They worshiped at the Caledonia Town Hall here just down the road. And when they finally were able to raise enough money and secure some financing, they purchased these 7 acres, which are the old Kabush farm. On the site here were the parsonage or teacherage, a barn, and a little swamp out back. They put the church up here, excavated it, built the walls, and then bought a 3-section prefab building and set it on the site. New Hope now had a home and worshiped here for many years. Now that barn was taken down, but it didn't go away. The lumber from it was saved, and the altar, the lecterns, the baptismal font were made out of lumber from that barn. So we're still connected to the farm that was here. Remember our roots. Now, New Hope worshiped here for quite some time. The problem is that New Hope has very rarely had a full-time pastor. We had a full-time pastor for, I believe it was 5 years with Pastor Yankee. And that's the only full-time pastor New Hope has ever benefited from. Now, we benefited from a lot of part-time pastors, vacancy pastors, professors, retirees, shared ministry, part-time pastors. But that really only lets you survive. You know, when you're looking at a pastor that spends 16 hours preparing a sermon, and you got a part-time pastor for 20 hours a week, you're very fortunate if you can spend time at meetings, do in-reach, teach confirmation classes. And we've been blessed that we've had pastors that have been willing to do that. We saw a spike in our membership, and that was in about the mid-2000s. And we decided to expand our facility here. And we increased the size of our building by, I think, roughly 50%. That allowed us to provide more seating in the sanctuary, provided us to finally have an office for the pastor, a room for counting and for communion supplies and some other things, and room behind the altar for storing our paraments and banners. And the other thing it gave us was a place to extend our sanctuary for large services like Easter and Christmas, by way of extra seating in the back there. It gave us a nice fellowship area. You know, so we've got a mini kitchen there with a coffee maker and a fridge and a sink. The original fellowship area was a hallway about 6 feet long in front of the coat rack, with a stairway on one side and bathrooms on the other. So you are in a very perilous position if you're sticking around to talk to anybody. You could either be pushed down the stairs, pushed into the bathroom, or forced out the door. Not a good position to be in the winter. So, you know, this gave us a much larger space. And at one time, we were even looking at having 2 services here. Right now, New Hope only has 1 service, except for Lenten and Advent when we have the midweek services. So we were actually very close to looking at a 2nd service. Now, the problem is with part-time pastors, it's very hard to maintain your membership. It's very hard to have growth, and you just survive. So New Hope's position now is that we're kind of in a maintenance phase. In fact, we're a maintenance / approaching survival. And we need a shot in the arm. Now, it's not Pastor Scoggins' fault, because the Presidium decided what the proportions of his time were going to go. So originally it was 20% to Oasis, 40% for St. Luke's, 40% here. So that's even less than a half-time pastor. But he's been a blessing to us, because he still made time for outreach. He still made time to come to all of our meetings, and he still makes time for a Bible study. So we're really getting a lot of bang for our buck, but we're wearing out a young pastor real quick, because we're not the only ones doing that. So Pastor Zarling came to us and talked to our leadership here during the, I think it was the last service of Lent. And he spoke with us with a proposal from Epiphany. The original proposal was Epiphany really needs another pastor. The standard is that a pastor typically takes care of 150 to 200 in their membership. He's taking care of 400 at Epiphany. Another pastor that's being worn out. New Hope really needs to have more pastoral care. So ideally, we'd be looking at 60 to 70% of a pastor's time, with the additional going to help Epiphany. So basically, we're helping both congregations. So it rapidly turned into a merger discussion, because it seemed to make more sense. So that's what's brought us to this point. Now, has a decision been made? Absolutely not. There'll be a vote later this year. If we're not ready for the vote, it's not going to happen. We'll postpone it. And you've got a lot of people on committees, pretty much 50-50 from both congregations, and they are working very hard to look at the pros and the cons and look at the mechanics necessary to make this happen if it happens. So the project management team's job is to kind of watch over these committees, collect their reports, and kind of keep them on the ball. So information will be available on the website. Sandy's going to be posting the reports from the committees. If any of you have access to the Google Drive, you can see other information there. This is being saved and will be posted on our webpage. And Kelly's going to be talking to us, or Shelley's going to be talking to us about the timeline very shortly here. So the idea being is that, and the reason we're kind of shooting for a vote the end of this year is that that's about the same time that Kenosha is going to be voting. So Pastor Scoggins' call is in play. So he could get called in Kenosha, or not necessarily call. Kenosha could issue a call. We could issue a call. We kind of like to see that happen at about the same time. And the Presidium may have a completely different idea. So that's kind of the mentality behind the scheduling of this. Again, it's not going to be forced. We get to the end of the year and there's committees that still have questions. There's still some issues that have to be resolved. We'll wait. So we're not forcing this down anybody's throat. Don't get that idea. So the benefits, 90 years of experience at Epiphany, the school, programs they have that we don't have. This is going to be an equal partnership. So it's not going to be Big Brother Godzilla Epiphany coming in and swallowing up little New Hope. We're going to be two campuses of the same church if this happens. The strengths that New Hope offers to Epiphany or to the merger, we've got programs they don't have. They're very interested in our Jesus Cares program, our soccer camp, our recovery program. Gary's been doing the prison ministry. So we've been doing things that they haven't done. They're doing things we haven't done. And cooperatively, hopefully we can expand those programs and spread more of God's word to more people. So there's strengths to go both sides. We have a campus on the far north side. They don't. We have 7 acres of land, potentially a third campus for WLS when they decide to expand. We've got a lot of land here. It's a practice field. It could be a practice field for WLS for their soccer teams. So we both bring something to the table in the way of an offer. We both benefit from it. And that's what we're kind of looking at, that there's a benefit to both congregations. And ideally, when we're talking about 1 + 1 = 3 or 1 + 1 = 1, we're both going to be stronger congregations if this happens. So thank you everybody for sticking around for this, and we'll turn it over to the next speaker.
I did. I went skydiving the other day with my daughter, and I did not lose any height. Thanks for having me today. A lot of things that have already been mentioned, so I won't touch on those. But just to think of God's hand in working on this. I don't know if we would have this discussion if I wasn't called 2 years ago and asked to be a mentor for a new pastor that was going to be in Racine. So I think the seminary wanted a guy who had been in the ministry for a while, over 20 some years, someone who was old enough to be Pastor Scoggins' father, and then to be able to minister to him. Someone's different than a circuit pastor that's over him, but a brother in the ministry just to bounce things off. And Pastor Scoggins mentioned it, because I am older, my mind doesn't forget some things. So yes, the first time we talked about this was at Toad Hall Pub downtown. We talked about sharing ministry, and that's not working with you guys. You guys understand that with St. Luke's and Frieden's, and you know that that's not working quite right. And so then in February we met, and that was at Old Madrid, and we talked about, well, what about merging our congregations? And to see from February to where we are now, how quickly things are moving along, and that's the work of a lot of the leaders in our congregations, the people that are on those 8 committees. It was already mentioned about the pastor's time. So if you have a pastor that's not preaching every week or teaching that Sunday Bible study every Sunday, what can you do? And the division of duties that the Word and Sacrament Committee is working on is that, say, I would be the leading and training pastor. What that would mean is that I would oversee things like council, elders, IPSC, worship planning, visit shut-ins, those types of ministries. If we have our young people that want to go on a mission trip, if we're going to have a soccer camp, we're going to do stewardship, I'm going to be the one that trains everyone to do that, instead of just handing things off and now just do it. And then Pastor Scoggins' call would be to the growth ministries, things like college students, young adults, teens, Jesus Cares, outreach, Hispanic outreach, Sunday school, all of those things that Pastor Scoggins and I do in our own locations, but just kind of touch on, and then they kind of run on their own. This would be a pastor that's focused in their area of ministry. And then what does that mean for our congregations? It was talked about of 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, of not duplicating ministries, but expanding, multiplying our ministries. I think that's the big thing. It's about harmonizing what we already have in our locations. That for New Hope, 40 years of being here, sending your kids to Wisconsin Lutheran School, but really not having a say in the school. Merging with us, now you have a say in our school. Epiphany, if we join with you, we have grass. We have a lawn. And what a blessing that's going to be. Just to hear the excitement of people from both congregations, of being able to look at the Epiphany campus and doing this type of ministry. Our people looking at the New Hope campus and saying, well, what kind of ministry can we have at this location? When I started talking to some of our members in the last few months, when COVID hit, I started doing personal devotions and private communion in our fellowship hall, we call our friendship room. And I started broaching the subject of a merger. And one of our members who had grown up at Epiphany, like so many of our members had, said, I just don't know if I'd like to give up our name and go or the same church, but it's a different name. And her husband, who was a convert to Lutheranism, said, but if this is what God's will is, then a church location or a church name shouldn't matter at all. I got goosebumps, and I told him that, and I've always quoted him on that because that's the mindset. It's not about what's best for New Hope. It's not about what's best for Epiphany, not our location or your location. It's about what's best for God's kingdom. If we can reach more souls together, both in our congregation and reaching out to the lost in Racine, that's the key. That's our main focus. So everything else, it really doesn't matter. As long as God's kingdom is in our mindset, then that's the focus. Thanks. Amen, Gavin. You must have had a really good catechism teacher. Amen.
So this morning, when I had the opportunity to talk at Epiphany, not a lot of our people from Epiphany had had a chance to be at New Hope. My daughter actually had a chance to work with Gavin and his family and was asked to choose cares. At Epiphany a little bit earlier, and all of New Hope is worship the cross. And I realized that Jesus, that program. I love coming here for a lot of reasons. I love the church. It is. I love people. Dennis has always been the man at the door when I come here, helped my mother-in-law in the church and gave the bulletins and escorted us in. Gavin and Rusty. Love Gavin and Rusty. And told me came up with the rules, kind of the rules together. I needed to come in. Amazing. Heather would work all day. She had the 3 kids at home. She said, "Oh, I can't believe I agreed to do this." Supporting my daughter and our churches was I came to the, I think I missed one confirmation. Kids, I heard this morning and yesterday recovery program. Today I heard about the ministry. Every time I hear something, I get goosebumps because the things that you're doing, fourth generation, first generation, because we joined the Wells Lutheran later in life. I can say that I know that we're in the right area and we're at the churches we're at for the right reasons. Right now, today, in these unique ministries. And so as we move back to Racine, I haven't felt that. I haven't felt that. It's very exciting, so not. I'm offering help in some of those unique areas. The whole idea of being able to be 1 + 1 = 3 is amazing. And we really need to take the time to think about the opportunities that we have. I want to share one other thing to you because a comment was made by Scott saying that when we merge, he has a feeling that the time is right because it just feels right. Doing our research, we're still making sure that we understand if it truly is if it can be done financially, benefiting both of the congregations and our community. And Sandy, I hope you don't mind, I'm gonna share a really quick story. Sandy is a multi-generation Lutheran. I happen to be able to work or be on a Zoom meeting with Sandy and the team for their worship committee. And there's another woman that has multi-generations. And it's tough for us to want to change. It's really a struggle because this is our home and we've created this. And Sandy, humbling comments I've ever heard. So, you know, when I'm asked these questions, these are tough questions to consider. These are tough things. Do you really want to give up or change something? Because this is our home. But then I ask myself, do I want to be like my mother and struggle to change as many older generations do? Or do I want to put the faith and the trust and really truly expand God's kingdom? And when I ask that question, I want to be a part. I want to make sure that we're doing the right reasons. And it would be selfish of me not to consider all the alternatives. And I thought, what an incredible, inspirational answer, which I'm sure she just did out of her heart. And I watched her think. I mean, she really, and she was looking up like she's looking at God for help to how I'm going to say this. But it was amazing. And when you realize that you're working with people that think a lot like you and they have a lot of those same struggles, that we have this opportunity. So decisions have not been made, but you have a lot of people here doing their due diligence and working on things. One of the things I had mentioned is that we have stuff for you to read. I'm already, because I just talked too long, I'm sorry. That we've gotten from our workers. We have some of the committee members that are here that you may not know from Epiphany, and Tracy is here. Scott had called out Rod earlier. Terry, I'm sorry. Terry is actually working with the shepherding committee, right? Which one? Outreach committee. Okay, and that's one of the ones that we're looking at for the Hispanic ministry. We had to church today to say, you know, I like all these ideas. What about a single parent ministry, single mom ministry? We have a lot of that here too. People are starting to reach out. So you guys are outreach or shepherding? Shepherding. All I keep thinking is evangelism. We do not have the word evangelism in any of our committees. I get stuck. So we have a shepherding committee, outreach committee. We had buildings and grounds here. Next month you'll hear about the financing and also the Constitution and bylaws. So thank you everybody for your help. What I'd like to do is Shelley's going to come up real quick and go through the timeline really quickly. And again, I'm sorry for taking an extra few minutes.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Shelley. Huh? Can you hear me? It doesn't sound like. Okay. put that there. I'm Shelley Evans, and I am a long-time, lifetime member at Epiphany, well over 50 years. And I am too multi-generational. My mother was very involved in the church. And so I'm just going to take this last little bit here, summarize that Pastor reached out to a bunch of us around early June to say, would you be interested in, being part of these committees? So about middle of June, we have between Epiphany and New Hope, there's 32 people currently that are within these 8 committees. So there's a lot of effort, energy, time, dedication. I already thank so many of you. I'm so appreciative, and just want you to know that you may be hearing from some of the committees, as we might need subcommittees. So we're welcome anyone who would love to participate or be a part of one of these committees. They weren't selected for any reason other than Pastor reached out to us and influenced us a bit, but I'm certainly very passionate about the growth and thriving of our congregation for sure. So this is just a quick timeline. I know you heard how important communication is. We are taking this extremely important. So we are our first kickoff, but our committees meet via Zoom at their convenience, but then we are having an all committee meeting following this open forum. We want to keep the momentum going. This forum is for us to provide you the information. The next big date for you to remember is August 23rd. We will be here again and at Epiphany. That is your time to ask a bunch of questions, but I don't want you to think there's a whole month involved here. If you want to reach out to any of the committee members that are listed on the documents that will be posted to the website, emailed, hard copies, however we can get that information to you, pose your questions ahead of time. The sooner that we have them from the project committee, we'll disseminate them to each of the committees, get more of the team so that they can do the research and discovery so we can best answer all of your questions by August 23rd. That is a key date. Then, God willing and weather, we have this beautiful green space here at New Hope. We don't have to have a church picnic at Pritchard Park, and we can enjoy it here on your lovely area and be together and have a joint service and fellowship together. Our next big date is October 18th. That again, we will have and gathered a sufficient amount of information. We will then address questions. If we have to address them again, we will. Every project needs to have an end date, a target date. Our initial goal date is November 1st to have a joint congregational service at Shoreland. And then if we are prepared and ready, that would be the time for a vote. So that's kind of just the timeline that we set aside from the project committee, and that'll be on the site. So the times are listed on there as well, but all of the committee members are listed, their email contacts, right, from all of them. So meeting more of you. I've had such a pleasure of being kind of the point person. Word and Sacrament, my team. Outreach is my team. And budgets and finance is my team. And then Kelly has 2 and Dennis has 2. But I just want to say thank you to Dennis and Kelly for all your work on this especially, but I've so enjoyed getting to meet you and work with you. And we go way back, but love working with you. Okay. Thank you. Oh.
I could make just one note, folks. We have to vote on November 1st. The congregations will be voting individually.
Oh, I'm thinking probably not, but to find a male representative and really speak with another gentleman, yep, within the congregation, express any of your concerns and or your Yep. Okay, so in closing, I don't know if Pastor Scoggins or you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Gracious Father in heaven, and the chaos and darkness that sin causes in the world around us, Lord, you allow these things to come into our personal lives. You allow them to come to the world and they too much and seem like what we're going to do. Because the reality is that at the same time you allow these things, you give us a charge as your children. You give us the charge to go out and preach a message of hope and peace, to be people that bring this message into the world around us, into those who are in a state and in a day of terror and confusion. So Lord, as we continue these discussions, Lord, to do just that, to better be lights in a world that is dark and confused by sin. We ask that you bless our conversations, bless our steps forward, make what will be best for the kingdom very evident to all of us. All this we bring to you in Christ's name.